Welcome to the Trent England Show. A little early today because we have a couple of events here today at the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs because we have a special guest in town, Vinnie Vernuccio. Vinnie, welcome.
Thank you, Trent.
And we should tell people you are a labor policy expert. You've worked on labor policy for a long time, and right now you're with the State Policy Network. Let's just talk a little bit about the background. I know we're going to get into some specific measures that address maybe the sort of undue influence that labor unions have and the rights of workers. But let's talk a little bit about where things are with labor policy right now, because there's a big Supreme Court case that is percolating right now and expected, I guess, to come down in June?
That's right. Well, big is putting it mildly, Trent. The case is Janus versus AFSCME, and it could bring right to work to public employees across the country. I know here in Oklahoma you already have that, but it is going to be a big deal, and we'll tell you how it affects you here at home as well.
Well, yeah, and explain right to work to people, because I still get people in Oklahoma, in other states, who say, well, right to work means that you have no unions, or different theories about. Explain right to work.
Sure. Right to work simply means a union can't get a worker fired for not paying them. Doesn't affect collective bargaining any other way. You can still have unions. They can still collectively bargain over wages, hours, working conditions, anything they could before right to work, they can negotiate for after right to work, except the ability to tell a worker, you have to pay us or lose your job.
That seems pretty extreme. Does that really happen in states that aren't right to work? People really get fired just because they don't want to participate in a union?
That's right. It does happen. Now, you can opt out of the union even in a non-right to work state, but you're still stuck paying the vast majority of those dues. If you don't pay those dues, yes, the union can go to your employer and say, this person isn't paying us, it's in the contract that they have to, and you have to let them go.
Wow. That's a lot of power for a private organization, right? These are all private organizations. So what does Janus do, this case? How is it that a case before the Supreme Court could have this big effect? I guess a real change in the way this would work in a lot of states.
That's right. Well, Mark Janus is represented by the Liberty Justice Center out of Illinois and the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. And their argument is simple. It's that everything government unions do is inherently political. So just think about it. Unions are bargaining for higher wages. Where does that money come from? It comes from your tax dollars and mine. They're bargaining for different working hours or different things in the school day. What is that? That's public policy. So Mark Janus and his attorneys are saying that everything they do is political, and because it's political, he has a First Amendment right not to be forced to support that political organization.
So this is really a freedom of speech case.
That's right. It's a First Amendment freedom of speech case that will let Mark Janus and public employees in the 22 non-right to work states where unions can get workers fired for not paying them, these public employees say, no, I don't want to support this union's politics. I should be able to keep 100% of my dues.
Now, I mentioned that some people think, and I've even heard this in Oklahoma, I've heard people say, well, we did right to work here back, over 15 years ago, so we don't have any unions. And there are people in rural parts of Oklahoma where they really don't have a teachers union, there's no law enforcement unions, there may not be private sector unions, and they really think that right to work just kind of wiped all this away. But that's not true. Everybody realized that with the recent school shutdowns here. How is it that unions still have power even when we have right to work?
Well, once again, right to work doesn't affect unions' power. It doesn't affect their collective bargaining. It doesn't affect anything besides their ability to get a worker fired for not paying them. So yeah, you still have unions in right to work states. In fact, in some right to work states, union membership is actually outpacing union membership in non-right to work states. And yeah, case in point to the argument, well, we don't have unions, we pass right to work. Well, A, that's simply not true. But B, I think it was made crystal clear with your teacher strike a couple weeks ago, where teachers actually went out and it was organized nationally by the National NEA, National Education Association, and National Teachers Unions. And they organized to deprive children of a day of education, several days of
10
education.
days of education.
Exactly.
In most cases. So how is it that these unions, so we hear people say, well, you don't have unions. We discovered that that's not true. Oklahoma actually has some relatively powerful enough that they shut down school for a couple of weeks. What gives them that power? And I guess I should say, too, in the wake of the school shutdowns, there's been a lot of teacher complaints about the unions, actually coming from both sides, and that tells me that these unions do actually have a lot of power. They shut down schools. There are a lot of teachers who are represented by the unions who aren't happy with them. What is it in the law here in Oklahoma that allows these unions to have all this power?
Well, it's the states giving them the ability to collectively bargain, be the exclusive bargaining agent, have a monopoly over those teachers, over bargaining for those teachers, and also the difficulty it is for those teachers to say, you know, this union isn't representing me, we don't like them. We don't like the fact that they made our students miss 10 days of education. And in Oklahoma right now, it's very difficult to get rid of that entrenched union and even bring in a different, more local union or a different union that may have more support among the teachers.
So what's the solution to that? What's the law change that would give teachers maybe a little more of a voice, kind of equalize the playing field between the union organizations and the teachers?
Sure. Well, Representative Russ actually introduced a bill. I believe it's not active now, so it may have to take another form. But essentially, it's called worker voting rights, or union recertification, if you will. And it's simply about democracy. It's simply about giving teachers, or public employees, teachers in this case, the ability to re-elect their union and say, this union is doing a good job, I want them to represent me, I want them to collective bargain for me, or no, they're not. And you know what? It's time that they leave and we either go without a union or we have a new union come in and reorganize us.
So I've had people who are big fans of unions tell me there's no more democratic organization than a union. You're saying that that's not actually true right now.
Well, you're talking about Democrat with a little d, of course.
Well, with a little
No,
d.
absolutely not. I mean, many unions organized decades ago. I live in Michigan now, and the Mackinac Center, they did a survey of the 10 largest school districts in Michigan and found that, just statistically speaking, when these unions organize these school districts, you're talking about some school districts like 1% were there when the union organized. In some cases, it was 0. So I'm trying to figure out, well, okay, you can't really just go out and report 0, right? So what do you do? So I looked at how many of these teachers were even alive in these school districts when the union organized. And less than 25% were even born when the union organized. So you're not just talking about your parents' union, you're talking about your grandparents' union.
So there is some kind of a vote or a democratic process when the union organizes originally, but then it's just there forever?
It could be there forever, yeah. I mean, there's very difficult ways to get rid of it, and it's very heavily stacked in the union's favor. But what worker voting rights or union recertification bill will do is it simply says, hey, by secret ballot, every so many years, these teachers, these employees, they should have the right to re-elect their union. And you do it by secret ballot. You do it so that all teachers have a say, so the union wants to get a majority because they represent everybody. They should get a majority of everybody. Yeah. And they should stand for re-election just like we vote for president, just like we vote for governor, state legislature, Congress, all of these elected officials. Public employees should have the same right to re-elect their union.
Well, one of the things that's always shocked me is there are a bunch of different unions out there, but it seems like they don't really compete with each other. Is that because once they organize a workplace, they're just there in perpetuity? I mean, is that what allows them to sort of carve up the world and not have to compete to say, well, our union serves workers better than your union?
That's partially true, but that's not even giving credence to when they actually originally organized, because you're almost assuming that there was competition when they originally organized. And while you can have that, and that does happen sometimes, it's more like the mafia. It's more like you get the Bronx, we get Brooklyn, and they carve up the territory at the leadership level. So you're not talking about the teachers or the employees having the right. It's more the leadership going, okay, you can get this school district and we'll take that school district, so they don't compete.
Well, let me ask you a kind of a wonky question, but I think a lot of our viewers and listeners will get this. Maybe they're thinking the same thing right now. If a business did that, that would violate anti-monopoly laws, antitrust laws. Why are unions allowed to do that?
Because they're exempt.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you than that. Unions are exempt from anti-racketeering laws. They're exempt from the anti-monopoly laws. So they have very, very special privileges on a state and federal level.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, this sounds like this. You go back to recertification, and we'll wrap it up with this. I mean, this sounds like a pretty common sense thing. Do we know anything about? I mean, do they do this in any other states? Is this, is this something that union members actually find to be useful to them? It would seem obviously beneficial if you're a unionized member to get to vote every so often on whether to keep your union or change your union or not have one. But what do we know about it?
Oh, well, yeah, it's starting to catch on, and it is a new policy, but several states have already passed it. Florida recently passed it about 2 months ago. Before that, Iowa passed it. Wisconsin passed it. I think there's also a version in Tennessee. So, yeah, it is a new concept, but it is starting to catch on, and it would be great to see Oklahoma as the next state to give teachers the ability, the democratic right, to re-elect their union.
Makes sense to me. Thanks so much, Vinny.
Hey, thank you, Trent.
Thanks for watching the Trent England Show. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Trent England Show, also facebook.com/OCPA Think. And, of course, the archive, audio and video, it's all there, the old radio archive at OCPAthink.org. We actually just refreshed the website, put a new coat of paint on it, so go there and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching the Trent England Show.